Well, really excited for our session today entitled Landing Your Sales Whale, ABMified Revenue Strategies That Convert. We have an awesome partner, RollWorks, and two incredible guests today. Danilo Nikolic, and correct me if I'm wrong, Danilo, I apologize for butchering, the VP of Sales Development at RollWorks, as well as Paul Sullivan, the MD and founder at Digital BIAS. Quick one-liner of each. Danilo has over 20 years experience leading high-performance outbound and inbound sales teams, sales development teams in diverse industries, while Paul, the founder of Digital BIAS, product marketing agency and HubSpot partner, has worked with B2B SaaS RevOps teams across the GTM lifecycle. So two really cool perspectives today. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you, Jared. And you pronounced it correctly. And you can intro me anytime, man. I love it.
Yep. Oh, man. I for sure thought I stumbled there. But, you know, let's get right into it. There's this phrase, sales whale. And heck, the title of this speech is about that. Danilo, how do you define sales whale?
Yeah, I mean, you're long story short, looking at, a big deal, right? But a big deal is not necessarily, your stereotypical, large enterprise target. It can be, in a lot of cases it is, but the reality around ABM, and it's one of those misconceptions, is that ABM is only for big accounts. ABM is here to help you, close deals, bigger deals, faster velocity, less churn, and so on and so forth. But the reality here, these big deals could come from a variety of different accounts, right? So we're going to talk about how you strategically attack accounts using ABM, but, get this notion out of your head of like few accounts, they're always big and so forth, because they could come from a number of different areas.
Yeah, I'm going to hold you to unpacking that in a bit, but I want to hear from Paul. Sales whale. What is it to you?
Yeah, I kind of agree with Danilo. I think that it all depends on how you're measuring revenue, right? Because it could be like recurring revenue. So is this an account you can land and expand? And therefore that's a whale of its own. And then you've got to have that strategy in place. And like you said there, if you've got the enterprise accounts coming in. But I agree. I think you need to really take each target account in its own right and work out where the long-term revenue is coming from.
Yeah, and you all are dropping these phrases like we take it for granted, ABM, ABS, and I want to unpack this a bit. What the heck is ABM anyway?
Yeah, I mean it's just been a buzzword, I guess, for the past at least 5-6 years, and it's funny because when you ask different people what it stands for, you just get different answers, right? And it varies from person to person, and company to company, right? So I'll give you my 2 cents, and Paul, you jump in with yours. I would say just at a high level, you're looking at, 2 basically fundamental, pieces to it, if you will, right? Number one is you definitely want to have alignment between the 2 teams, right? 2 teams being marketing and sales, right? And so when it comes to the alignment, 2 things that I specifically think about is, are we going after the right targets, the same targets, right? Are we on the same page that, these are the right accounts we want to go after? Because if we're not focused on the right, on the same thing, you're going to have a ton of challenges downstream. And then the second piece of ABM to me is that, at the end of the day, you've typically constructed marketing and sales as almost like a handoff. We're going to give you this warm lead, this warm person, this somebody that's showing an interest, and then you take it and run with it. And I think ABM is fundamentally changing that it's no longer just about the handoff. It certainly, in many cases, is a handoff, but it is a longer-term strategy that involves involvement from a marketing standpoint throughout the sales cycle. right?
Now,
all the way to close one deal and then to the customer side of things, right? And I think that's the fundamental shift, 30,000 foot view. But Paul, yeah, jump in, man.
Yeah, I was just about to say I completely agree with you there, because I think a lot of people feel that this is just a warm-up process from marketing. It's a better approach than inbound, and so this feels like this is going to solve all my problems, and it's happy salesman rubbing his hands together, and that's just not the case. Like we talked about this just before the call, that there's this element of ABM, ABS, whatever you want to call it, where the alignment has to happen, but the teams have to work together across the whole life cycle of the deal, right? And I literally finished writing an article yesterday, and I was talking about this, where if you're a smart salesperson, right, and you've got to close this deal, why wouldn't you want someone else helping you? It's not like you're giving away any of your profit or your P&L to this person, but they are there to walk you through it. They're going to give you the right assets that you need at the right time. They're going to give you a different perspective on how you should be looking at this target account, and maybe even how you approach it, the language you use. And I roll this all the way back into product marketing, or helping you communicate this value, right? So this ABM thing, you mentioned marketing, you've mentioned sales. We could talk about how product should be part of this, and even to a degree customer success. So it's a bigger picture approach than that alignment.
I want to jump in here. Danilo said, we started off with sales whale, and that being the concept of a big account, and that ABM doesn't need to be a sales whale. Product-led growth, ball in your court.
Yeah.
When you don't have a sales rep aligned, or you're having a product that has maybe a low ACV, how can we ignite ABM?
So I was definitely wanting to talk about PLG on this call. So I'm glad that you phrased that, Jared, because
you're dropping product. I gotta add it.
Yeah, and look, I'm helping people do this PLG stuff all the time, and I kind of get the impression there's two types of people. There's the people that see it just as an activation channel, and there's other people that see it as like the next big thing is the golden egg and it's the way forward. And with 70% of SaaS still leading with sales, or still having some sort of sales-led motion, or having an enterprise element to their product, there is no way that product-led growth solves for everybody, right? And actually, you've got all the other problems that come across, the holding free users, there's still natural sales attrition. And so for me, there's going to be a perfect trifecta at some point where you say, right, we need to drive demand or drive traffic into the top of that funnel, because we've got this open top product and we need people in there, right? So your inbound is that. Your inbound, it targets personas and it's talking about problems and it drives them into the top of the funnel. And that's great, because that is the total reverse of ABM, right? Because ABM is saying, actually, this company is a great fit for our product. And we've got 20 of these in our CRM at the moment already, and we know that we can go in with a case study, with the use case, with the example, with the ROI. We can go in and do that 10 times out of 10. So these are going to be our best options for targeting. And so for me, Danilo, I don't know what you think, but this three-pronged attack is the way that I see it going future forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to kind of take what you were saying, Paul, a little bit further, right? I've had quite a few conversations around, what you were talking about from an outbound perspective, right? Identifying those 20 accounts, knowing that they're the right fit. They may not be coming into you, but you've got a compelling offer, right? And so a lot of times that's exactly what people tend to neglect when it comes to ABM, right? They almost miss that piece of it. I call it the 95-5 rule kind of thing, right? So the way I see it is, typically there's only about 5% of your TAL that at any given time is, expressing an interest. And there might be an expressing an interest to buy your product on your website, but it might be a situation where, they're maybe doing it on a third party, right? Don't get me wrong, this is extremely valuable. This 5% could be representing, 50, 60% of your pipeline. But what do you do about that rest? And that's, Paul, to your point, where that 20 comes in, is how do you, attack it from an outbound perspective, right? That's really where, I feel like there's not a lot of conversations around ABM and how ABM can help in that area.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't like to talk tools, but I think inevitably we all need these tools to enable the processes, right? Because sales enablement's a key part of this. And so, we don't see that being spoken about. But there's a particular tool that I use. I'm not going to start promoting names, but what I like about this tool is it builds B2B audiences. So if you're going after ABM is perfect, you connect it to your CRM. It actually analyzes your best won deals. So if you can identify what a wow looks like in your CRM, and then it identifies those deals, it will go out and find you 10, 100, 1,000 lookalike businesses that you can then put into your ABM, right? And I think this leads on to a bigger question here, which I get asked quite a lot, right? If most people start in ABM go off the standards, right? Oh, 1 in 5 accounts will activate. That means I need to 5x the number of accounts I can target. But wait a minute, I want to target 400 companies this year. So you're telling me I've got to go after 2,500, 2,200 companies? How the hell do I approach that? I've gotten some ideas, but what would you say to that?
Yeah, I mean, you're again spot on, right? I mean, you think about it and you're like, okay, going back to your tools conversations, Paul, I mean, you may have some of those folks in your database, right? At the end of the day, you know who the accounts are, but you might not have all the right people. You may not have that entire buying committee in there, right? And it's difficult to get that, right? Talk to your marketers, right? I mean, they're some of the hardest working people out there. They're doing webinars, they're doing content syndication purchases, right? Just to build that audience up. But it's costly, right? And sometimes you get lucky and you get some of those folks that you can build it up, but in many cases you don't, right? So that's part of the challenge, right? So you do need to get a tool that's going to be able to actually get you past that.
Exactly. Right. And sorry, Jared, can I just finish there? It's like the other thing I would say to that is that I talk to the C-suite quite a bit, right? And I've run ABM plans with big fintechs and whatnot. And when we're sitting talking to the C-suite, the one thing that is fundamentally different from most things is the C-suite sit there and say, Paul, I'm just not buying on LinkedIn. And everyone's like, I need to be on LinkedIn. I've got to inbox these guys. They're like, no, I'm looking for peer-to-peer examples of this. They're looking for you to be outside of the box. I'm only interested if you're going to share something that's going to take my knowledge of what this is about further. I'm not interested in you trying to close me or invite me into a demo and telling me all that stuff. So fundamentally, you have to completely reverse the psychology of a salesperson and say, look, this is about relationship building and not closing a deal. So there's a bigger play here at hand.
So I think we've done a pretty good job here of defining what the heck ABM is, right? We've spoken about alignment around targets. We just started touching on entire buying committees. and Danilo talked about providing some air cover, and there's other things like gifting and all of that stuff that undoubtedly goes towards that. But all right, we unpacked what it is. What are the benefits, y'all? Danilo, what are some of the benefits?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, right? One thing, that none of us want is churn, right? That's a big one, right? If you're in the SaaS space, it's a big word, right? So the reality there is you do want to make sure from an ABM perspective to take advantage of picking the right customers, right? Or rather picking the right prospects that are going to turn into customers, right? Because you want to make sure that your product at the end of the day is a really good fit for them, right? So having an ABM solution that's going to help you identify your A accounts, your B accounts, your C accounts that your sales team is going to, prioritize is absolutely crucial. Because you start with the wrong accounts, you could execute flawlessly downstream. It's not going to make an impact, right? So that's one of them. Faster deal cycles, right? If we're jiving,
yep.
you're a good fit. You're a good fit for our product. These things go fast, right? higher win rates, deal sizes, you name it, right? I'm sure I'm missing a couple, Paul, if you want to touch on them.
Sure. Try win rates. Oh, sorry. Do you know what? I was actually tied to something you said earlier, which I just want to jump back into, because you talked about like the approach, sales, deal speeding up, right? But ABM has been around since like way before 2004, right? So everyone today is like, ABM, it's like this new thing. It isn't. It's been around, right? We just haven't been executing it the same way. We haven't put a name on it, much like PLG, right? But just coming back to your thing, and then Jared talking to PLG, with the way that PLG now plays into the customer acquisition mix, inside sales, the new role that we're looking at, these guys that are sitting and looking at what's going on inside the platform, they actually now need to feature as part of the ABM list, because account-based marketing is about keeping that wheel turning. It's about how do we move them into the sale, and if there's possible, how do we upsell them and make sure that that's meeting the client's need and continuing that relationship. And then like that for me was like something I just wanted to add here, because I think that ties up PLG, ABM quite neatly. But in terms of like attribution, you're going to be looking at how fast your deal cycles close, what sort of revenue you can get, actually looking at who you can disqualify. Yeah, there's a ton of them, and I mean, as I say, I've just written some articles on that, and I should probably have 20 on the tongue, but I don't. I'm sorry.
Oh, one I gotta mention, because Jody, my counterpart on here at RollWorks, we always look at is higher conversion ratios on all your other channels, right? One of them being content syndication, right? Getting more out of your MQLs that you see out there, right? Because it's not all about, I know I get this question a lot of like, oh, am I going to get a ton more leads or whatever? That's the one-dimensional piece. But yeah, Paul, jump in.
Yeah, and I think you've just hit the nail on the head. I think like if you come from a company that's running inbound, and you're quite used to getting your landing pages out and running some paid at those, and that's how you're trying to get those people in there. I think that content syndication piece, which is about going and finding the ICP or your persona where they are, is a completely different approach and probably not common in the marketing mix. So you're definitely going to need to work with a platform that enables that ability.
I'm curious. You have 1,000 named accounts for your company, right? You're running ABM on all of them, doing everything from gifting soup to nuts. How do you focus on companies outside of that with a similar ABM structure when you don't have a named account, but somebody just raised a Series B or something, Danilo, and now all of a sudden they should be named, but how are you staying abreast of that, like super quick, and then building them in quickly into the other structures, or having a catch-all for a lookalike ICP that addresses them pretty darn good, considering they might not be named?
Yeah, I'll give you an answer. Though probably touch on a portion of that answer,
sure.
Right? Because I mean it's fairly complex, right? It's simple, but it's not. So right. What I mean by that is, you do have the tools and technologies these days to actually identify those, right? In addition to, companies that you're going to find out from an intent perspective are showing an interest in your product, there's actually intent that's based around, what an account is going through themselves. Are they releasing a new product? Are they, going into another market? Are they hiring? Are they raising funding? Right. So all of this stuff that you talked about, Jared, you do have technologies that will surface those to you. Right. So that's one piece of it. Right. The other piece of it is, just having that always on mentality. Yeah. Right. And making sure that you're touching them, and don't get me wrong, it's not all marketing, right? We've been talking about marketing, ABM. My SDR team, we're considered not just, driving the pipeline to the end, but also part of that nurture process, right? So that's a role that, any SDR team, should be taking as well. But Paul, did you want to jump in there as well?
Yeah, I was just thinking that it's not all the course of marketing, but I do feel like your marketing team are probably going to have a better use of like your marketing automation tools and lead scoring and all of that sort of stuff. And if you're not using like an intent platform, a number of those, I know you guys partnered with one, Danilo, you're not really going to see that. But there are some free things you can do, right? You can use like Google Alert to track the latest B-series announcements, or you can get on Crunchbase, or there's a number of free things you can do. But I think it comes back to that thing what I said earlier on, is about the research doesn't stop just because you're in play, right? Yep. It just doesn't work that way, because we fundamentally do not know what the attrition is going to look like in this cycle, this month, this deal. And so we have to kind of hedge our bets and say, look, we can't overcommit because we still got to do this really, really well. But as we start to see that these accounts just aren't activating, let's just bring a fresh set of accounts in and then move this ABM play along the same way.
I think that's super cool and super spot on. I mean, looking at like some of the benefits with better focus, efficiency, and cost savings, how is this even more relevant during a recession? Which we may or may not be in right now, depending on who you ask, right? And glass half filling it, but we are. It's a tougher time today.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll tell you, for me, my answer would be probably 2 words: joint plays. We do this so efficiently with our marketing team. I'll give you, just a couple of examples, right? One, our own product, from air cover perspective, we talked about that. We do ads, right? And so, for me, it's how do I increase the efficiency of my SDR team? Well, the efficiency of my SDR team, at the end of the day is, how many more responses can I get, right? People are going to immediately jump to how many opportunities are you going to, yeah, but that's downstream. I want to look at it from an activity perspective. So we actually even ran, a study last year and compared our outreach with ads and without ads, right? And what we found is, depending on the segment, the replies increased between 50%, and in one extreme it was 2.5x. So let's just pick the 50% increase, right? Like if I'm getting 100 replies and I can get 150, that 50 replies out of 50 replies, I would probably get 1 out of 5 of those replies to say, sure, I'll take a meeting, I'll turn it into an opportunity. Just on that conservative lift, that's an extra 5 opportunities. You close 1 out of 5 of those, that's an extra deal, right? So that's efficiency right there, right?
Yeah.
The other one is that gifting, Sendoso. We use Sendoso internally. We partner with a number of, gifting solutions out there, and it's just fantastic because we'll get them to a point where they're engaging with, our emails, right? Or engagement, LinkedIn, right? You name it, phone calls and so forth. But they might be opening the emails multiple times, clicking on our links, but never replying. Guess what? We'll hit them with Sendoso. We'll introduce a gift, to kind of push them over the fence. So it's all about that. It's all about the synergies between different channels that are going to bring that efficiency, right, to your output.
Now, I don't know if you explicitly said this or you inferred it here. Higher ROAS with ABM. Is that what you said, or in between the lines?
Sorry, what do you mean by that?
Return on ad spend. So it's the idea that if you have a social presence or you're going at them a certain way, and pardon me, I'm an old marketing agency person. I
saw Paul.
Paul, I said it right? Everything is going to hit that much harder, right? If you're dropping $10,000 a month on paid ads, you're going to have a higher return because you're probably targeting the same people who are getting hit by gifting, who are getting hit by emails and all of that. Is that what you're seeing as well, Paul?
Yeah, I think there's a number of things that goes on in this space, and all credit due to the gifting platforms. I think firstly, like anything, if you run the same sort of ads as the competition, everyone gets bored of them. People stop seeing that. If you if everyone's sending you like $5 to buy you a coffee, like that becomes boring. No one's looking for that, right? So be creative. And also, right, we're just moving into a whole new realm of sustainability. So you could actually, come shoot your bolt, for want of a better term, by sending the wrong gift, right? You send something that's unsustainable. The company says, well, we don't deal with that. That's a black mark against your name. This is like, you've got to be really, really careful. But for me, if I'm walking into a recession and I'm looking at my strategy and I'm saying, I've got like this much money going out on PPC, we're retargeting here, we're doing all this work on the outbound, blah, blah, blah. I'm starting to think, what can I do to get the most return for my money? If I need to curb some cash in my marketing strategy, because everyone does that, even though the reports will prove that you shouldn't be doing that, but everyone does it. And then it's like, right, I've got these options. I can go PPC, but that's spray and pray. You don't really want to be doing that. I want to go a little bit more targeted, so I might just like be building like lookalike audience, and that's great. But actually, you're trying to catch revenue, right? We all know that when the recession comes, people stop buying, everyone gets a bit cagey. So your job is not to drive demand anymore. You're actually focused on revenue goals. I'm not a big believer in MQL. So when I'm watching this that kind of want to put the MQLs in the mix, just shift that one to the side. But definitely start focusing on how do we take this marketing budget and use it to best serve our sales team. Percentage of that goes on brand for definite, but how do we best use it for our sales team? And for me, you're going to go ABM and you're going to go programmatic, and you're going to be looking at how do we build a funnel where these ads support nudging all the way along the sales funnel, getting the right messaging underneath the right people's noses, whilst our BDRs and SDRs are dealing with those inbound and outbound queries. That's how I'd approach it.
You know what gets me so excited about this conversation? We're talking about ROAS and SDRs in the same conversation. Foreshadowing? Come on, everybody. Yes. Yes. Alignment. We have SDR managers watching saying, Ro, what? Like, it's all for the same purpose. You got it. Return on ad spend. You're going to know more about it soon. And, so rethinking convention. So what's, talking about creating demand and capturing demand. I know Danilo was talking about the 95.5. Wanted to unpack that a bit more, Danilo. Like, go into that a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, so for us, right? Like I said, there's a bunch of organizations that are, living quite happily, with that 5%, right? It's probably not getting them to the 100% of where they need to from a pipeline perspective. But, there's organizations that are trying to open up a new space, right? New market. I talked to a customer, the other day that is in the security space, and they're completely introducing a new way, right? So, it's very similar. I won't go into it in too much detail to like data loss prevention, but different spin, right? And I was very interested in that, just coming from Symantec. I spent 3 years there. But
Nice.
How do you do it in that market, right? Nobody's looking for your product. Nobody. So they're not knocking on your door, and so what do? You kind of latch on, to some of the folks that might be interested in DLP, which just stands for data loss prevention. That's kind of similar to that. And you try and change that mindset. But reality for that organization is they primarily are going to rely on outbound, right? They really need to get that message out there, right? So for us, what we like to do is just really focus our efforts quarter in, quarter out. We have a set of target accounts that, we identify as really solid outbound targets, right? Going back, Paul, to what you said, here's the 20. Well, we pick out 2,000, but I've got 30 SDRs, so we can cover a lot of ground.
Yeah.
And so, our idea there is, okay, the marketing team, the SDR team, the sales team knows what those 2,000 accounts are, right? Now, they're not always 100% new. If we haven't worked them thoroughly, then, obviously, we're not going to refresh those. So a majority, may stay, but that is your, sort of North Star, right? If you will. Those are the accounts that we need to get into. So the idea there for us is all the SDR efforts that are aimed there, you need to have a way to, support us, right? And so our marketing team is just absolutely fabulous, right? So Jody, my counterpart, we always joke around. They call us Joe Nillo because we work so close together, and we have to, right? Because otherwise, how are you going to, turn that, into meetings, right? And so that's a big portion of what we like to focus on. And so for us, we eat our own cooking. We, are looking at those accounts from a perspective of, air cover, engagement, and so forth. And what's very, very helpful for us when we're going outbound, this is not something that we talked about, but, starting to actually come up with a definition for your marketing qualified account, right? Because a lot of times, I go back to what Paul said, MQL is just a single touch point. It's almost like we go from the top of the funnel, go down to a single point, and then sales says, okay, you're expecting me to take this and now do this, right? As opposed to just having a straight funnel down, right? So, eating our own cooking, we can actually see in our product all the different touch points and the entire buying committee, how they are engaging, so that way when we're reaching out, we're not reaching out to a single person, right? We're not, reaching out to people that, we think, are irrelevant, right? We know exactly who those folks are or should be that we're reaching out to, right? And how they're engaging with us, right? So it's important if you have an ABM solution to give you all that data, because you might have 2 or 3 individuals that are not MQLing, but they're on your website. Yeah. You might have one individual that you're, nurturing with HubSpot marketing automation that's opening your emails and clicking on your links, but they're not becoming an MQL, right? So having all those data points for us is huge, right? One other thing that I'm a stickler for is if marketing comes to us with a single lead, guess what? I want you to reach out to that person, but then I want you to reach out to Susan, Bill's, the person's counterpart, and say, hey, Susan, Bill was on her site. I noticed you handle this, help me connect the dots here. Is this something that you're interested in, right? So you build a full comprehensive strategy when you go outbound. And I think that's the critical piece, is that focus on those accounts, the air cover, and just that broad strategic approach. So I know I talked a lot. Hopefully that made sense. But Paul, if you want to jump in.
I'd love to hear Paul. And also, does someone need to fill out a form to be an MQL?
Yeah, that's the boring part of it, right? So for me,
do you really need to? Like, if you see somebody on your site for 30 minutes and you know that they're engaging with different content and stuff, and it's ungated stuff, they're on multiple pages, super interacting, and you have their info, that's an MQL, no?
That's high intent. That's a very high intent.
That could even be an SQL.
That's what I was just thinking.
Right?
I think what the reason I didn't interrupt Danilo back then is because he was in a good flow and he just shared a good amount of information there. But I think one of the things that I was really focused on when I was listening to him was the way that he talked about his relationship as a sales leader with marketing, right? You guys cannot execute ABM if you think you can just do it as 2 separate teams, or it's a top-down leadership-led movement for you guys to say, look, you guys are now partners, right? I'm going to give you 3 are going to get this one marketer, whatever you need. They're going to tell you how ABM runs. They're going to give you a little bit of training. You're going to give them some insights about what's going on, and you're going to start sharing this information, and we're going to make this approach standardized across our whole team. It's not the wild, wild west. Not everyone's going off doing their own thing. We're going to do it standardized. We're gonna kind of productize that if you want. We're gonna measure. We're gonna look for bottlenecks. We're gonna find all this information we can, and then start thinking outside the box of where, like you just said, high intent shows. Because if you're not looking for it, you can't find it. And if you do find it, what can we use from our tools, right? You know, if someone's in a CRM, especially on HubSpot, and then they're on your website, you can start triggering emails to go out to say, hey, Frank, you was on our website 2 days ago. You know, what is it we could help? I saw you looked from here to here to here. So it seems like this might be something you're interested in. And then you get that level of personalization and you start improving that person's buying experience, because that's what ABM's about, right? It's about building relationships and thinking about what the buyer wants rather than closing a deal and thinking about what the sales rep wants. Ultimately, you're going to get to the same place, but you're likely to improve and increase deal time. So you're going to reduce the time in the cycle and increase the relationship, which means revenues increase because you can renew, but also you're looking for those opportunities all the time to upsell.
Right.
Absolutely. Just spot on, Paul. I mean, Jared, and I applaud you for making that comment. That always cracks me up. You know, when people are like, well, they gotta fill out a form. It needs to be perfect. I'm like, wow, you may not be that hungry then. You know, if you're not chasing that type of stuff down, oh man, it's trouble.
You could make an argument on relevancy that they don't even have to come to your website. If they hit certain criteria, they're hiring. You could tell in technographics they're using a competitor. Mm-hmm. The contract's about to end. They voiced concern, mm-hmm. X, Y, and Z. It's like, maybe they just don't know about me. and I should, and they're ready. And you have a LinkedIn post that says, and we've all seen this in the last week, tell me some X I should be talking to.
Yeah, I've seen it. I posted something myself about a platform. Boom.
I think that's relevant. And so, yeah, walk me through brand versus reach versus conversions.
So for me, I think brand and reach go hand in hand. When you're trying to get sight on your brand, I think reach ads play a good part in that. Now, don't get me wrong, I am not a paid ad specialist, so I'm just talking about my understanding it from a strategic point of view. Right, those top of the funnel things, getting people into ebooks and using native forms on LinkedIn and Facebook if your people are there, like that top of funnel stuff, building brands, showing insight, that's all good. What was it? Brand, reach, and what was the other part, Jared?
Conversions.
Conversions. So this is where the MQL gets in the way for a lot of people, right? I was on a webinar recently, and someone said, I've downloaded our ebook. So I did. I think RollWorks are involved in this, by the way. And within 3 minutes, you know, they must have had an auto dialer. This guy's downloaded it. I'm like, I haven't even got time to even read your ebook, let alone decide if this is something that's going to help me. And you're already on my case. This is not the buying experience that I want. And so, no, please leave me alone, right? So that is a conversion, but that's not the right sort of conversion. I think when we talk about conversions, we're really looking to see people move beyond that, right? The world's just saturated with content. Most people are still forcing people to find out what your content's like. This is what's creating like these bottlenecks. You're saying to me, look, I've wrote this really, really good piece of content. You have to give me your details before I'm going to let you find out if you can do that. Now, I'm just going to say that Drift as a platform does this really well with their chat landing pages, right? Flip the model. If your content's that good, let people digest it. And if they want to take it away, they're going to give you their details. Or if they want to go further down that funnel, they can give you the details. Your sales team in that scenario have access to that person's activity and can strike the conversation if they show intent. So it's about thinking strategically about the type of the conversion and where it happens in that person's journey, and then being able to tie it back to all the other things. You know, how many ads did they engage with? How many pages have they been on your website? How many times have we spoken to them? How many emails? Like, it's not a one-time thing. It's a collection of activities, including maybe that download of an ebook and so on and so forth, right? Webinar conversions. And for me, you just kind of got to put them in the right sort of merit. I'm not sure that I like the MQL scoring highly in terms of lead scoring, though. That's just the personal thing.
Yeah, just to add what Paul said, right? I mean, to me, the first two make sense, right? and why, I mean, is just obvious because, I head up an SDR team, right? So I want to make sure people know who, RollWorks is and what we do. So that way, when we reach out to them, obviously there's a little knowledge there rather than, so what do you guys do? Right. So that helps, right? Being able to reach 2,000 accounts that we're trying to reach out to and get the people that are maybe open to a conversation to somehow raise their hand. And we talked about what those signals are. Absolutely critical. But I agree with Paul 100%. I mean, this really, comes down to, your ROI conversation that you're having internally, right? Because we're so fixated on, getting this lead, getting this conversion. And so what that ends up happening is that I see a lot of people that'll start ABM. Yeah, it didn't really work for us. Well, we tried it for like 2 months and we didn't get any leads out of it. It's like, man, I mean, it's tragic because it's such a proven, success mechanism, for driving pipeline. But you got to give it time, right? Going back to Paul's, comment there, when you're thinking about ROI when it comes to ABM and sales, it's really about that longer term vision, right? And I even tell my SDRs this, right? I'll have my SDR come back to me and say, man, sent them this great customized email and, I got this response that he's not ready to talk for another 3 months. And I'm thinking, oh, that's a touchdown. And he or she is coming to me saying, I don't get a meeting this month. Yes, but you got those, you're planting those seeds. And I said, once you get that going, guess what? Next month, you're going to get another one that's 3 months out and 3 months out. When you get to those 3 months, guess what? You're going to walk into every month with a couple opportunities in the bag, right? And so I just urge people to be patient when it comes to this kind of stuff, right? It takes some time. It takes a lot of, back and forth and collaboration and pilots and, communication with your marketing and sales teams to figure out what that perfect situation is. So you just got to really commit to it.
Yeah, and I think to echo that, if you think about what goes on in the world in reality, right, there's people that just commit to inbound. So we're going to go completely content led and we're going to wait the 8 or 9 months it takes for this to ramp up and actually start making an impact for us. Right? You might do it in 6, whatever. It depends how much content you're putting out there. But you know where I'm going with that. And then someone else says, actually, I'm going to do my inbound, but I'm going to support that with paid marketing because I want to actually ramp up this activity and shorten the time that it takes for me to see impact, right? But they're starting to tweak things and they're optimizing it. Well, ABM doesn't just get put in play and then that's it. We're not going to sit there and just wait and say, okay, coming in. Where's this one coming from? You have to kind of analyze what's going on. You still have to measure. You still have to test. It's the whole point of kind of having this kind of play. But you're trying to say to yourself, look, if we've got 3 tiers of customer, we're never going to go and test in this first tier. We're going to find these guys down the bottom here in this 3rd tier, and we're going to play all the sorts of plays we can, and we're going to find out what starts sticking. So that's your 1 to many, right? And then as you start moving up, you go, right, we're going to go 1 to few now, right? There's fewer targets. We're more in tune with what's working for us. It's less likely to cause problems, and we know to a degree that this is going to work, and we're less likely to lose these guys. And by the time you've kind of maxed out those guys, I'm not saying you don't work the number ones, because I'm not saying it doesn't happen that way. But by the time you've got your process and your processes down and your market strategy, this is when you're going to start seeing like the return. So if you've never done ABM before, you have to go through the cycles. And if you have done ABM before, anyone listening will say, yeah, of course, I had to test, I had to iterate, I had to measure, I failed. And sometimes just by the very nature of people, some people are going to lead you down a path. They've got no intention of buying from you. They just don't say no. But that's just the world we live in, right? So don't get put off by it's not working, right? If your sales cycle's 45 days, you can't say we tried it for 2 months because I would laugh at you. That's just not really going to make sense. So you got a 45-day sales cycle, and for 2 months it didn't work. So effectively, 15 days of that, you're going to give credit to the approach that you made. It just doesn't make sense.
I want to be conscious of time. We have some gems being dropped here, and it seems like some tips and tricks are already sneaking out. But if you had to give, a few or a couple of your favorite tips to leave everybody with, what would it be, Danilo?
I think it goes back to what we talked about in the beginning, or it might have been towards the beginning, but just having an ABM strategy and account-based sales connection, whatever you want to call it, that's always on, right? This is not, a pilot, a project. I'm going to try and do this. This is something that needs to incorporate and encompass your entire, go-to-market strategy. So that's one, for me. So it's got to be programmatic, right?
Yep.
What Paul talked about, honestly, that was just a perfect way to finish this. He's spot on. I mean, you've got to commit to ABM. You got to make sure, that, you have your trials and tribulations and those little things that you're going to go through, right? I'll tell you, we've failed miserably many, many times here internally, right? But that doesn't stop us. We continue going because you're going to see that success, right? And probably just, the third thing I would say is just, focus, make sure that you bring that focus no matter what aspect of ABM we're talking about, whether it's the target accounts, whether it's, what strategy, you're trying to drive, whether it's, capturing demand. Personally, I'm a big fan of outbound, so creating that demand, right? But that's huge. And we talked about it. The ROI is there. It's you can't question it. So I would wrap up with that.
That's good. Tough to follow. So I think for me, one of the things that I would say is just get going, right? Devise a plan of action, and just start executing on it. Don't get too wrapped up in the details. Make a real, full funnel approach of where this person's going to be in their business with their problems. What does the typical buying committee look like? And say, right, we just have to try it. Without trying, there's no learning. If there's no learning, there's nothing. So for me, just do it.
And just to touch on that, because Paul, you one-up me on that one. That was gorgeous.
Ready, fire, aim.
Yes, I mean, just fantastic. Because you've got a lot of naysayers out there, right? You got a lot of people confusing folks and telling them, oh, to be ABM ready, you need to be this, and this. It's like, don't go with a vendor that's going to ask you to bend over backwards. To Paul's point, it doesn't matter where you are in your ABM journey, it's going to work for you, and then don't overthink it. Just get going, get started.
Yeah.
In closing, from each of you, one bold prediction about how ABM is going to evolve, or other channels and things that are going to be added to it.
Yeah, I'll jump in here if you don't mind. I'm going to go back to what I said earlier, right? I think it's going to be a trifecta at this point of PLG, inbound, and ABM. I think that is what we're looking at in the future.
I'll tell you one thing that was like a myth that I feel like, don't get caught up in it. There's a number of different folks that are, for lack of a better term, swing hard from one end to another. Don't do it. Everybody, if you're talking to somebody and they're telling you MQLs are dead, ABM's the new thing, all you need to do is just ABM, they're full of it. Don't believe it. I'll leave you with that.
My bold prediction, hearing you all, more dark channels being focused on and figured out as part of an ABM strategy. Okay, let's be real, and also ABM being encompassing from a PLG standpoint, especially this new product-led sales thing where people are in there. So it's not just product-led sales, it's product-led ABM, if that makes sense, because
ABM.
you need to hit them on both sides. Just because they're in, sales isn't enough there, is all I'm saying. So the combination of maybe those are the most obvious predictions. I don't know. To some they are, and to some they're like, whoa. But y'all, this has been awesome.